If you are learning how to draw, I highly recommend giving charcoal a shot. I think charcoal is one of the most underrated art mediums out there, and the more that I use it, the more I wonder why it's not way more promoted online towards beginners. In my opinion, it's one of the most versatile, accessible, and easy to learn mediums you can pick up as an artist. And at the end, I'll explain all that you need to get started. The first reason I love charcoal is that it's super simple. For the most part, you're dealing with three basic grades: hard, medium, and soft. That's basically it, and I think that restriction is a huge advantage. You're forced to really just focus on technique. Charcoal strips things down to some of the most fundamental elements of drawing, like value, pressure, edges, shape, and texture. You can do quite a lot with it. Also surprisingly forgiving. One of my favorite things about charcoal is the way it interacts with paper. It sinks into the surface really nicely, and compared to graphite, I find that it doesn't have quite the same annoying tendency to sit on top of the paper and smear everywhere. Yet it's still very erasable. And that brings me to one of my favorite things about charcoal: blending. Blending with charcoal is a dream. You can cover a huge area incredibly quickly. You can make a gradient, you can smudge something deliberately, you can create a soft transition, and then 5 seconds later, you can put a razor sharp edge right next to that soft transition. That makes charcoal an incredibly manipulable medium. But charcoal isn't just good for learning how to make charcoal drawings. This is probably one of the biggest reasons I recommend it to people who are starting out. The techniques transfer. You can use charcoal to practice things that you'll eventually use in other mediums. Like take painting, for example. You can layer, you can blend, you can build up values gradually, you can work from large shapes into smaller details. And charcoal supports a wide range of subject matter, like portraits, figures, landscapes, still lives, animals, architecture, abstract work. You can basically throw a subject at charcoal and it'll cooperate. It's also a very cost effective medium. Charcoal sticks are not very expensive and last a decent while. And lastly, charcoal just looks great. There's a reason charcoal has such a timeless look. Part of that is thanks to the range of values you can achieve, because unlike graphite, your darkest values don't have that same reflective metallic quality. Instead, it gives you these beautiful deep blacks that actually stay visually dark under various lighting conditions. So what's the catch? Well, first, charcoal has a reputation for being very messy, but there are ways to manage this. In terms of dealing with the charcoal itself, one of my best tips is to wear a hand cover. I personally like to craft these myself out of old clothes and hair ties. I find they keep my hand clean as well as my paper. Sharpening is also more deliberate. You can't sharpen a piece of charcoal with a standard sharpener, so you'll want to get some kind of sanding tool. What's nice is that you can shape the tip very quickly and you have a lot of control over what kind of point you're creating. I also sand mine over old cloth, so the mess is actually pretty manageable. Now, I do use wooden charcoal pencils, and those do need to be sharpened with a knife. Also, charcoal is fragile, so it is easy to break them this way. And this is the messiest part of my process. You don't have to get wooden charcoal pencils, but it does keep the process cleaner. The manual sharpening is probably the biggest drawback for me, but hey, at least it looks cool. The last major problem is archivability and smudginess, but this is very fixable with a fixative spray or rubbing alcohol. So what do you actually need? First, you'll want the basic charcoal varieties: hard, medium, and soft. You'll want a kneaded eraser, a regular eraser, and optionally you can get a micro eraser for tiny details. Next, you'll need blending tools. I use blending stumps, but I've heard makeup brushes also work well. I cannot recommend enough buying this item in bulk. They're weirdly expensive when you buy them in tiny little packages, but you can get a big assortment of different sizes for pretty cheap on Amazon. If you're going to draw consistently with charcoal, you'll fly through them. I've also done this with my sanding sticks. I'll put links to the materials I use in the description. Lastly, you'll need paper, and honestly, experiment with this. I've had good results with just regular sketching paper, and I've also really enjoyed charcoal specific paper. Charcoal is surprisingly compatible with a lot of different surfaces, but I recommend surfaces that are a little more rough. If you want to see a more in-depth tutorial of how I use these tools, I'll be covering that soon. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you there.